Welcome to our Bucky Critical Path Reading and Study Group for July 22nd and 23rd, depending on whichever continent we're on. Manu, how are you feeling this morning in South Africa, and what do you expect from today?
Feeling a little bit tired, early for me, but anyway, I got energized with your music, Steve. Thank you for sharing. I feel good. Really, last week, I was amazed by Becky's description of what the fire is. It was really interesting. If we could all, have that ability to reason like that, to get into the deepest of things and precision while describing, that would be fantastic in communication. So what I expect is for us to continue on critical path and ground it on the issues that we have today and discuss and see if we can have any improvement in our understanding and the way we use what we learn and grow and help around. That's my expectation. Joe, how do you feel? What do you expect?
I'm feeling okay. I'm a little tired too. You know, so I'm my expectation for today is to, continue with critical path and to see, what takeaways we can to we can use in our everyday life, or at least allow us to see things differently. I think that's the most important thing is that I'm able to spot one of Bucky's concepts being used in another domain, and it just has a different name. So, and I think critical path is providing us with a little bit of a historical context, but it is also providing us with some of the modern uh, uses of things like the assembly line that we covered last week. So it's interesting how that can be. We applied that earlier this week to our discussion on simplification. So in any case, Steve, how do you feel? What were you taking away different today? Thanks for the music. It actually did wake me up. Gave me a little boost.
Yeah, it's amazing what people miss when they don't show up on time, or a little bit early, right? Joe, I listened to the 52 Living presentation on tometry.
Yeah.
And you and I've also, we've looked at together, we've looked at the amplituhedron, and we've looked at the Hopf vibration. And it's like, and there's been a lot of, if one looks at the YouTube videos for people like Sabrina Hossenfelter and Eric Weinstein, and even Green, I can't remember his first name. I want to say Lauren Green, but I think Lauren Green was the guy from
Saturday Night Live or something. I don't forget. Yeah, I know you're talking about
the physicist Green, who is a string theory guy. They're all talking about how quantum physics is basically bankrupt. It's not going to give us the unified theory because all it is looking at the parts. And as you mentioned, Joe, it's like science is now turning around and looking at the system. And, and it's real fun because like I was watching the tometry guy and I kept thinking of Mobius band, which is like the first, about 30 years ago, I bumped into Mobius band, and that was my first idea of a toral relationship, that half twist or 1.5 twist in energy. And then, of course, we learned about Bucky, about the 720 degrees. And so we're talking about electrons, that go through that wine dance thing, where instead of being 360 degrees at 720 degrees, the thing has to turn twice to come back to its first position. These are all Bucky concepts. Now, I'm sure they were around, and Bucky was picking up parts of people, but he bet everything. He put his whole farm on this thing. And now to see science coming around to that is kind of interesting. And so I'm looking forward to reading and more on Bucky and critical path, and just figuring out, just seeing what his perspective was back then, see how things, like you said, Joe, are kind of coming around today. In some ways, the world is leaving any kind of logic and reason behind and any kind of compassion. But on the other
Right.
hand, there is some hope for compassion. And of course, that's what Bucky was all about. What's Critical Path is all about is not leaving anybody out. So I want to learn more about that. And I'm really grateful for those who can make it to the call, for you guys and anybody who can make it to the call. Because sharing your paradigm is really helpful. I don't remember if we had on the recording, but Ann Tam sent the greatest message to us. Her school is just having all sorts of successes, and we'll wait till she gets back to share that with everybody, but she sent us a little email and I shared it before the call. So I'm looking forward just to reading and see what we can do. We left off right here on page 64 of Critical Path.
Sure.
We'll go for a ways.
Okay.
How you,
I'll give it a shot, and if depending on how how my fatigue, how I hold up, we'll see, and then we'll go from there.
okay, cool.
So I'm sure our human forebears went through quite a period of giants and giant affairs evolution. These probably led to all sorts of truth-founded legends from which fairy stories were developed, many of which are probably quite close to the facts of unwritten history. Then humans developed to the point at which a small man made a weapon, a stone slinger, such as in the story of David and Goliath, with which the little man slays the big man by virtue of a muscle-impelled missile. At the U.S. Naval Academy, ballistics is defined as the art and science of controlling the trajectory of an explosively hurtled missile. After the sling and spear, we got the bow and arrow, with which a small man could kill a big man at much greater distance than with a spear or sling. So skill in human muscle-impelled weapons ended the era of giants. Discovery of energetic principles and human inventiveness in using those principles, such as the invention of catapults and mechanically contracted steel spring coil arrow implement, advanced the art of weapons. The human power structures that could best organize and marshal the complex of essential best weapons and support an army of best trained people with each of the special types of weapons were the ones who now won the battles and ran the big human show. The discovery of gunpowder by the Chinese and the invention of guns introduced in the era of ballistics, as the Navy terms it, explosively hurled missiles. Going back to the stone sling, bow and arrow, spear, club, and knife era of weapons, we find the territorial battles between American Indian nations were fought over the local hunting and fishing rights, but the land itself always belonged to the Great Spirit. To the Indians, it was obvious that humans could not own the land. There was never any idea that the people could own the land. Owning was an eternal, omniscient, omnipotence, unique to the greatness, universality, and integrity of the forever to humans mysterious Great Spirit. Until a special human produced change and evolution of power structures occurred, the ownership of anything being unique to the Great Spirit, in whatever way that might be designated by local humans, was held by all people around our planet. In 1851, Seattle, chief of the Suquamish, guess I'm saying that correctly,
Yeah.
and other Indian tribes around Washington, Puget Sound,
Puget
I-
Sound.
Puget Sound, delivered what is considered to be one of the most beautiful and profound environmental statements ever made. The city of Seattle is named for the chief whose speech was in response to a proposed treaty under which the Indians were persuaded to sell 2 million acres of land for $150,000. How can you buy or sell the sky, the warmth of the land? The idea is strange to us. If we do not own the freshness of the air and the sparkle of the water, how can you buy them? Every part of this earth is sacred to my people. Every shining pine needle, every sandy shore, every mist in the dark woods, every clearing and humming insect is holy in the memory and experience of my people. The sap which courses through the trees carries the memories of the red man. Legally, pigly. The white man's dead.
Oops, sorry, man. Oh my God. It could have been that we were at page 64. Hang on. Somehow I hit a button there. There we go. That's where we started reading today. There's our quote. Legally Pigly. That's the name of the chapter that we're on.
Okay.
And then now here we should be able to maintain some sense of the white man's dead.
The white man's dead forget the country of their birth when they go to walk among the stars. Our dead never forget this beautiful earth, for it is the mother of the red man. We are part of the earth, and it is part of us. The perfumed flowers are our sisters, the deer, the horse, the great eagle. These are our brothers. The rocky crests, the juices in the meadows, the body heat of the pony and man all belong to the same family.
Wow.
So when the great chief in Washington sends word that he wishes to buy our land, he asks much of us. The great chief sends word he will reserve us a place so that we can live comfortably or to ourselves. He will be our father and we will be his children. So we will consider your offer to buy our land, but it will not be easy, for this land is sacred to us. The shining water that moves in the streams and rivers is not just water, but the blood of our ancestors. If we sell you land, you must remember that it is sacred, and you must teach your children that it is sacred, and in that each ghostly reflection in the clear water of the lakes tells of events and memories in the life of my people. The water's murmur is the voice of my father's father. The rivers are our brothers. They quench our thirst. The rivers carry our canoes and feed our children. If we sell our land, you must remember and teach your children that the rivers are our brothers and yours, and you must henceforth give the rivers the kindness you would give any brother. We know the white man does not understand our ways. One portion of land is the same to him as the next, for he is a stranger who comes in the night and takes from the land whatever he needs. The earth is not his brother, but his enemy. And when he has conquered it, he moves on. He leaves his father's grave behind and he does not care. He kidnaps the earth from his children and he does not care. His father's grave and his children's birthright are forgotten. He treats his mother, the earth, and his brother, the sky, as things to be bought, plundered, sold like sheep or bright beads. His appetite will devour the earth and leave behind only a desert.
Wow.
I do not know. I do not know. Our ways are different from your ways. The sight of your cities pains the eyes of the red man. There is no quiet place in the white man's cities, no place to hear the unfurling of leaves in spring or the rustle of the insect's wings. The clatter only seems to insult the ears. And what is there to life if a man cannot hear the lonely cry of the whippoorwill,
Yeah.
whippoorwill, or the arguments of the frogs around the pond at night. I am a red man and do not understand. The Indian prefers the soft ground of the land of wind dating over the face of a pond and the smell of the wind itself, cleansed by a midday rain or scented with pinion
Pinion pine.
pine. Yeah, pinion pine. The air is precious to the red man, for all things share the same breath. The beast, the tree, the man, they all share the same breath. The white man does not seem to notice the air breaths. Like a man dying for many days, he is numb to the stretch. But if we sell you our land, you must remember that the air is precious to us, that the air, its spirit, with all life it supports. The wind that gave our grandfather his first breath also receives his last sigh. And if we sell your land, you must keep it apart and sacred as a place where even the white man can go to taste the wind that is sweetened by the meadow's flowers. You must teach your children that the ground beneath their feet is the ashes of our grandfathers, so that they will respect the land. To tell your children that the earth is rich with the lives of our kin. Teach your children that we have taught our children that the earth is our mother. Whatever befalls the earth befalls the sons of the earth. If men spit upon the ground, they spit upon themselves. This we know. The earth does not belong to man. Man belongs to the earth. All things are connected. We may be brothers after all. We shall see. One thing we know, which the white man may one day discover, our God is the same God. You may think now that you own him as you wish to own our land, but you cannot. He is the God of man, and his compassion is equal for the red man and the white. This earth is precious to him, and to harm the earth is to heap contempt on its creator. The whites too shall pass, perhaps sooner than all the other tribes. Contaminate your bed, and you will one night suffocate in your own waste. But in your perishing, perishing, you will shine brightly, fired by the strength of the God who brought you to this land, and for some special purpose gave you dominion over this land and over the red man. That destiny is a mystery to us, for we do not understand when the buffalo are all slaughtered. The wild horses are tame, the secret corners of the forest heavy with the scent of many men, and the view of the ripe hills blotted by talking wires. Where's the ticket? Gone. Where's the eagle? Gone. The end of living and the beginning of survival. In my prehistory accounting, I talk about the time when each ice age is engaging in an enormous amount of the ocean's water, lowering the waterfront and bringing together the islands of Borneo, the
Borneo?
Philippines, Borneo,
Yeah.
the Philippines, and others, all to become part of the Malay Peninsula. I also spoke of the ice cap pushing the fury animals southward until they were suddenly pushed into the land of the previous islands, now formed into the new peninsula, into the land they could never before reach. This is how the animals like tigers got out to now island places like Bali. Human beings, suddenly confronted with these wild animals, learned how to cope, hunting some and training others. In following the evolution of human power structures, we are now particularly interested in the humans who found themselves confronted with a tidal wave of wild animals. Those who were overwhelmed became aggressive hunters, and those who were not overwhelmed became peaceful domesticators of the animals. Some of the most aggressive men mounted horses, moved faster than all others, and went out to seek the beasts.
Okay, let's pause right there because I just realized it didn't make much sense and I've left something out. So let's have some comments up to this point, and then I'm going to take a minute and go find the stuff that we're going to have to put in right here. Any comments? Go ahead.
Well, I mean, it's interesting to see how, the distinction, between how we look at ownership and how we look at land versus the Native Americans. Now, there is a deeper relationship with the land with Native Americans, but I was actually out and there was a Swedish cabin, and they were telling me some different things about the trade and early settlers back in the 1600s. And they did say that, it was just both groups were actually, not abusing the land, but definitely taking advantage of the resources where, they even had cleared enough ground where they had done away at some point with the beaver population in Pennsylvania, which I had not known. Anyway, it was just one interesting perspective to say, we always talk about the land, but the reality is the settlers were commercialized, pirates, I guess Bucky would call them, and had no regard for anybody other than themselves, especially for native peoples, which is actually the most unfortunate. So, I mean, that's one of those tragic parts of history, of American history, that we have. And we have to live with that. And to tell you the truth, I still feel like Indians are still mistreated in a number of different ways. I won't go into that because it's not directly related to the text. So I don't want to go down the whole, you know, how they've been treated. We even just give them casinos. It was just, it's not. They haven't been adequately compensated for what they've lost. Nor do we pass laws that empower them either. I'm trying to think back to the first part of the discussion where I was talking about the weapons.
Yeah, me too.
A little bit,
Comment on that,
you
so
know.
I'm glad you're back there. What do you
Yeah. I mean, he talked about this a little bit last week when he was talking about it with the basically the hierarchies that would eventually have evolved, you know, where there would be a king and then essentially a person that would be a good swordsman and a person that would be a good spy and, you know, all this stuff. So he's talking about the evolution of weapons earlier. But I have no immediate thought on as far as, you know, I don't think, anyway, I no immediate reaction. I mean, it's in line with what we've been hearing.
Yeah.
So.
Manu, is anything coming up for you?
Just reading this, going through it, it just the grasp of the issues that we have today.
Yeah.
You know, the environment, the global issues that we have. That is it. That is the same, in my opinion, if you understand what these chief Seattle's talk was about, those same problems, we still have them today.
Yeah.
Albeit at the planetary scale. They are still very present. It always that you have, and then the other stuff that comes out to me is always the presence of that duality of the organized, call it ownership, and the communal, call it the spirit. It symbolizes, Chief say, he talks about the eagle and what was the other symbol? Contrasted, or the air and the ground.
Yes.
Yes. So you always have that at play. And the question is, where in the cycle are you? Are you playing, being mindful in that cycle that another phase exists and that it will come? He used the metaphor that if you are wetting your bed or something of the sort, you realize one day that you are going to be actually rotting in your bed. Did he say something like that?
We can go back and take.
I don't recall it right offhand.
Let's take a look at it. I noticed that.
I mean, he did talk about you know, the ramifications for behaving like this.
He talked.
I don't want to call. Yes.
Let's. I'm just going to open it up, and we'll look at the.
Then you know, we both share the same God and things like that.
Yeah. See here.
stench there. Let me just see.
Yeah, there we go. He's referring to the sky and the land. The
Yeah,
earth is part of my people. The white man's dead forget the country of their birth.
yeah.
When they
But
go to
continue.
the stars.
Continue. Quench the river, carry kindness to be.
Yeah, I love the fact that the rocky crests, the juices in the meadows, the great heat of the pony and man all belong to the same family.
Mm.
You know, the perfumed flowers are our sisters. The deer, the horse, and the great eagle, these are our brothers.
Yeah, it's very poetic.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like everything's alive and everything's connected and everything's sacred. The
That's
air is
right.
precious to the red man, for all things share the same breath.
Mm.
The beast, the tree, the man, they all share the same breath. He repeats himself. He's like a man dying for many days. He is numb to the stench. Wow.
He even talks about how the children,
Yeah, go ahead.
no,
Okay,
about how the children.
you see, what I was talking about is just there. You may think that you own him, his compassion is equal. No, just scroll up again.
Yeah.
Just very, very close. Just wait there. Just wait. Okay. So you may think that you own him as wishing his compassion equal for original. Okay, there. Contaminate your bed and you will one night suffocate in your own waste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was really, yeah. So we might produce, I'm just kind of a little bit miffed by the whole idea of growth, permanent growth. Call for quarterly growth in a
Right.
corporate.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It's, it's just that it's associated with progress. And that's the problem, is that nobody's really taken the time to articulate better measures of wellness. And even there have been economists out there that have, that are this is even an updated version of an interview that have put forth this idea, but you really have to be careful on how you present this idea, because people automatically think that degrowth is something along the lines of less opportunity, and that's simply not true. So I put an interview with Kate Rawworth, her name is, in the chat, and it's Rawworth, yes, and she has a lot of good ideas. Actually, she goes through the mathematics of how even some of the models that we use are misguided in what factors they even include to determine long-term growth, and some of the people that have won Nobel Prizes for their predictions, and how simplistic they are, how one-dimensional these models are.
Yeah.
So anyway, without going on a long tangent there, it's worthwhile. It's worth listening to. But I mean, the more important thing is that the idea that there are other models that exist.
But have you noticed how fast we've been sucked again into the AI fads?
Oh my God. Yeah.
You know, it was crypto just a few years ago. Now everybody, and there are funds that have been made. People are making money available for funds to be created to suck in the savings of people, and they will disappear.
It's crazy.
So we haven't marked, in my opinion, the lack necessary to learn. Maybe we are doing it, but it's going to be another, it's just going to accelerate, catastrophes. So instead of seeing how we can mount the horse, using the metaphor that Bucky said, to go further, we're seeing how to make money from the horse. And that's the difference, in my opinion.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is that we should look at what AI is, the technologies behind it, and see how they can help, rather than the other way around, rather than saying, okay, the AI, first, you have a phobia that AI is going to take over everything. And then you come back and say, okay, this is the way it's going to be explosive. And you got to make money. You can make money this way. So put your savings into this fund and it's going to be explosive. And we saw it. We just talk about Bitcoin, but nobody talks about all the other coins that existed that went to zero.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know how many coins were in issue, probably thousands around the world.
I mean, yeah. I mean, there
That have
were
been
so many.
decimated. Most of them have been decimated.
Well, the worst part is some people made money off those things, and they weren't ever worth anything. I know somebody right here. He traded stuff and made money, and it's. I don't know how he sleeps at night. I mean, because the stuff he sold was junk.
It's amazing the stories that human beings tell themselves.
I don't know how he sleeps. He's not a bad guy either. It's just,
We evolved by memes, you see, by stories that we tell.
that's right.
Those are the guides, because stories come from experience, right?
That's
And
right.
the experience is what we think works. We haven't tested that it works under all conditions. That is actually a principle. It's just a heuristic. So it works for some people who are doing some things that allows them to ride it. But it doesn't apply to everybody. Life is not easy. Let's just put it clear. It is a real lesson. The idea that life is there. We otherwise we wouldn't be, there wouldn't be any need for design. And the whole of Bucky's work has been around anticipatory design.
Right.
To cope with the evolution of our environment. That's what it is.
It's funny. I was reading a little bit, and I got to finish the article in Barron's. Just how the price of wind turbines were actually, you know, that I didn't read about it. They had supposedly a setback. But even the price of wind turbines at one point was $200 per megawatt. 10 years ago, it's 75 now or something along those lines. I mean, there's still a gap. It's still more expensive than other alternatives, which is problematic, but it's headed in the right direction.
Yeah, but it is a mistake to think about the so-called renewable in opposition to fossil.
Right.
Okay. I think that what is actually needed is the dedication of a use of certain type for certain bulks. I always thought that if the only fuel that we use, for example, was that for transportation overseas in big ships for exchange, and that the flexibility of being over land and the electrical things, renewable applications, that will go a long way, because it's part is a type of capital that we have.
Right.
And if you have a capital, do you want to expense it or do you want to amortize it? There
That's a
is a
better,
difference. Yes,
big difference.
yes. We've been expensing fossil, right?
Right.
So outstripping the recycling, the cycle wavelength of fossils. It takes millions of years for us to recycle, to rebuild stars, or to do whatever, right? Because we live and die, and the carbon that we fix has to go in through a certain decomposition and recomposition to make hydrocarbons, the organic matter, right?
That's right.
But we expense it. We extract 1 barrel and we sell it at 80 depreciated dollars. Whereas when Bucky was writing this, that is the end of the 80s, his estimate was a barrel will cost, you know, the real cost of a barrel is more than $1 million. I'm talking about dollar of the 80s, not the dollar of today. You get what it means, right?
Yeah.
So fossil fuel should be used in the same way. I mean, what hydrocarbon should be used in a very similar way to how uranium is being used. To use it to produce bulk energy. And when I mean bulk energy is what you call, you know, what is needed to run all the time. Then in electrical thing, you say there's mid-merit, and there is a peak. And your responses to mid-merit demand or peak demand are very different. You get me?
Could you say that again, the first part?
Okay, in generation of electricity, you have what you call the base load, right?
Okay.
That is what is there to run all the time. And in most places, that base load is sometimes provided by nuclear energy.
Okay.
Then you have mid-merit. Mid-merit espouses, for example, the basic, let's say, industrial production and activities, commercial activities. And then you have the peak. The peak is when you have spikes. For example, in winter time, when people get home, in addition to the economy running, they have to heat their homes. So there is a spike of demand for a period of time. So the whole of this could be reorganized, but the reorganization hasn't got to be countrywide. It has to be at the planetary scale for use of energy. And energy, you know, there is almost a one-to-one correlation between, how would I call it, growth, between energy output, between GDP output and energy is one-to-one. So the question is, that output of GDP, what is it? And how do you use energy? Are you producing all things that are all redundant?
Right.
In many different places? Or are you able to really realize that we are passengers on board the same space ship Earth? That's the point. And that is, I think here, that is what Chief Seattle was saying.
Yes. I do. I agree with you, Manel.
And I looked up bed load.
Base load, not bed, base.
Oh, base load.
Base, like the base. It's like, you see, like you are stacking things. At the base, you have a load. Yes. You see there, base load is the blue. Mid-merit is the orange. Peak is, I don't see anymore. Yeah. So yeah, that's, yeah. Normally you have base load, that is the blue there. What I call mid-merit is the green on the left-hand side graphic, and the peak is the yellow.
Yeah.
Looks like Amazon's cloud pricing.
So are we complete on this topic?
Yes.
I want to come back to in the writing where he talked about the missiles.
Oh, yes.
I want to find this here. And he referred to the wow, my computer is not working. He talked about the Department of the Navy. Oh, ballistic is another keyword. There it is. 64, yeah. I have a story to share. So the U.S. Naval Academy, ballistics is defined as the art and science of controlling the trajectory of an explosively hurled missile. The discovery of gunpowder by the Chinese and the invention of guns introduced the era of ballistics, as the Navy terms it, explosively hurled missiles. So I want to share something, okay? Personal share. Here we go. I'm going to take off my blur. And I don't know if I'm bragging or complaining. See this guy right here?
Mm-hmm.
This is
The missile.
the ICBM ballistic missile, the Atlas missile, that became operational in 1960, about 1960, 61. This missile was developed by my stepfather. He's ground support systems for the Atlas missile. I have 2 secret manuals right here on how to build a
Wow.
ballistic missile. My stepdad wrote these books, or he was in charge of the department that wrote these books.
Wow.
Isn't that something?
Wow.
The bad news is we can blow up the world. The good news is we had a missile that could offset or balance out the threat of the Russians, who could send a ballistic missile over to the US. So we were having bomb things. But my stepdad, can you see the binder right there?
Mhm. Secret.
Secret weapon system.
Yo. They haven't come to look for that safe from
What's
you?
that?
Whoever hasn't come to look for that for you from you.
I've got a
No,
couple things.
classified material is not what it used to be. I mean,
It's
well,
not what it used to
it
be.
is now. It is now, but even then, but back then, people used
If
to.
I put this on the internet, I'd be like
Different
Edward
times.
Snowden. No, that wouldn't be true.
I heard that, for example, Russia and the US, they have so many missiles with nuclear heads. And the thing is that if there is any, even one mistake that goes from either side, we are all finished. It's mutual destruction.
Mutually assured destruction. Yeah.
And that's the only, and we're very worried that in the world of today, there is no that red line that used to exist in the 60s between the White House and the Kremlin. There was always a line, and people, I don't know, I'm not in the know of what is going on, but we were very worried that there is no communication.
Well, do you know that Bobby Kennedy Jr. is running for president in America? And he's talking about that when he was a 14-year-old kid, his Uncle Jack had a red phone at the house. The Kennedys all live in a compound area where all the family lives together. And they
Yes.
knew that that phone rang, or if they picked it up and dialed it, they would talk to Khrushchev.
Yes.
And that President Kennedy put in that phone between him and Khrushchev over the
The Bay of the Pig.
derision of the military. They did not want him to do that. And he said, no, we're going to talk to these people. And you know what they found out? And Americans didn't know this, but when the Russians dispatched their missiles to Cuba, there were something like 6 different gunners, or maybe it was more than 6, who each were given authority to launch a nuclear missile at the United States at their own discretion.
That's ridiculous.
There wasn't one guy. They didn't have to go and call up Nikita Khrushchev. And by talking with Khrushchev on the phone, John F. Kennedy found out that the missiles were down there. So he and the State Department actually issued a thing that said, look, we need to launch on Russia now. We're going to wipe out Cuba, and we're going to launch on Russia. We're going to kill 30 million Americans in this blast, but that's okay because we're going to kill 120 million Russians.
But,
know,
but
not
do
counting
you
the-
realize that today is no more even that? We are finished. There's no hiding place. There is none today.
Well, in
The
fact,
advancement
right
of
now,
weapons.
there are
is
plans for invading Iran and China right now that are just as stupid as that.
It doesn't
Yeah.
work. We need to talk. We don't need to go
Yeah.
to war. We need
So,
to talk.
Yeah, no, we can't demonize anybody. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Is that's where it starts. As
What
soon as the
Bobby
name
Kennedy's-
calling.
What Bobby Kennedy says is that that over the protests of the State Department, JFK negotiated with Khrushchev that if he would pull his missiles out of Cuba, that the US would pull their missiles out of Turkey. And
Yes.
so Khrushchev
and
said,
that-
yes, we'll do that. And John F. Kennedy got the missiles out of Turkey, and nobody even knows
No,
anything about it.
that was the issue.
Yeah, That was the issue.
realize that Turkey at that time had a straight border
Yeah. To
with Russia,
With Soviet
okay?
Union.
Because
Yeah.
all of the Azerbaijan and all these countries,
Yeah.
Azerbaijan, which is the twin country to Turkey, were part of the Soviet Union. Okay? So after the Second World War, there were missiles in Turkey because Turkey is part of NATO,
Yeah.
right? So that's the same story that is going on today.
It is the
Yeah.
same. going on.
Yeah, the US,
With
you know,
Ukraine.
people are
With
saying
Ukraine.
the US cannot, you know, like if Mexico just tries to put anything, any base
Yeah,
of
missiles.
something, Mexico is going to be wiped out. It's not even going to wait 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that is there are powers, you know, like there are superpowers in the world. I'm not talking about economically, but in terms of arms.
Yeah.
Today, you have three. You have the US, you have Russia, and you have China. Those guys, they have enough power to say there is a no-go zone in their neighborhood. I'm not saying that anything justifies that, but that is a practice that we have to know. These three countries are masters of the world, of Earth.
Right. No,
You know what I'm trying to
absolutely.
say? So the
Yeah.
others have to follow, you know, like we need to talk. That's why it is so important that we talk. Imagine that the US and China and Russia got into a war. What, you know, it's crazy, isn't it? It
It's
is
crazy.
crazy.
Possible. It's possible.
I mean, Ray Dalio talks at large about that in his books. Really, he's been underlying this risk for so long.
And he would know.
Well,
No,
I'll tell you,
it's just watching because the worst of what he thought could arrive is arriving. I mean, we are really the big powers at loggerheads. Up till I say last month. When did the high US official visit China? That was last month or this month?
That was about 4
a
weeks
couple
ago.
weeks ago.
Yes. I hope, you know, some sense of measure is coming to our leaders, the big guys up there. Really.
I think we
I
need,
don't have a lot of faith for
the
that.
chances right now is that with the Ukraine thing going on, we're actually putting Russia together with China and creating, you know, this and the thing over Taiwan. There's just so much going on. So maybe we should continue reading a little bit more.
Yeah.
I did some work while
But that is the application of this, Steve, that's what we say. We have to bring it to what we are living today and see how it can help our perspective of the things going on around us.
Yeah. Okay,
So
cool.
to continue, where were we? We're at
We're right here. And here we go. There we are right there. I'm already sharing. So we left off with the beasts thing,
yes.
and
Okay.
we're continuing to read from there.
We have
So Joe-
learned in the last decade for our behavioral science from our behavioral science studies that the aggression is a secondary behavior of humans. That when they get what they need, when they get what they need, when they need it, and are not overwhelmed, they are spontaneously benevolent. It is only when they become desperate that they become aggressive because what they have relied on is no longer working. There are two kinds of social behavior manifest today around the world: the benign and the aggressive. it is probable that this dichotomy occurred in the human versus animal confrontation in the Ice Age time. Oh, so there-
Can I make a comment there?
Sure.
Okay. How do you then correlate inflation and aggression in light of what he said?
It's a way of warfare.
Yeah.
I mean, it's economic warfare to do, to manipulate your currency.
Well, it's a
Sure.
big deal. I mean, John Stewart makes a big deal over the Fed raising interest rates, which has an adverse effect on poor people in America.
Does.
It hurts corporations, sure. It stops them from investing and growing, which costs jobs and which lowers wages. It's like a war on poor people. It's like,
Okay, let me put it again, Joe. How do you see 1997 to today? That is 15, today is what? 1997, 20 years or 2000. Let's just call
26.
when Mr. Greenspan started,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And the fact that there are the normal cycle, economic cycle, boom and bust, is rather 3 to 7 years.
How do I see Greenspan?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the whole stuff, the interest rates have been kept abnormally low.
Oh yeah, for far too long.
Well, yes, for the past 20 years or so. So in spite of what they call the Great Financial Recession of 2008, the nominal price or what the so-called asset had just been going up everywhere. Now, it has to be linked to the paradigm. Can it always been kept up? The answer is clearly, given history, no. So you have to manage a fall at a certain time, a certain time. How do you manage that fall? Do you still holding or following the same paradigm? Or how does it go? And then you have to link that with what Becky is saying here, is that when humans find themselves in periods of strain, they become aggressive. And there have been strains. In spite of the face that everything is still good. There's a lot of pain behind. Just continue, Joe. That was just my notice, my small.
I appreciate that. When an ice age starts to recede, the horsemen start north, hunting with clubs and spears. At the same time, moving much more slowly, we have the beginnings of great tribes of humans following their flocks of goats and sheep as the latter lead them to the best pastures, sometimes high on mountainsides, sometimes on great plains. With the big man as king, the head shepherd, we have humanity migrating off into a wilderness that seemed to have no limits. The land belonged to the Great Spirit. The people lived on the flesh of their animals and the encountered fruits, berries, nuts, and herbs. They keep themselves warm with clothing made of the skins of the animals and also with environment controlling tents made of local saplings and the animal skins. We have a king shepherd from the day of the giants, tending his people and his flock, when along comes a little man on a horse with a club hanging by his side. He rides up to the king shepherd and, towering over him, says, "Well, Mr. Shepherd, those are very beautiful sheep you have there. You know, it's very dangerous to have such beautiful sheep out here in the wilderness. The wilderness is very dangerous." The shepherd responds, "We've been out in the wilderness for generations and we've had no trouble at all." Night after night thereafter, the sheep begin to disappear. Each day along comes the man on the horse. He says, "Isn't that too bad? I told you that it was very dangerous out here. Sheep disappear out in the wilderness, you know." Finally, there is no such trouble that the shepherd agrees to accept and pay the sheep for his horseman's protection and to operate exclusively within the horseman's self-claimed land. That's disgusting. You know, that's the same thing we read in it's the same thing we read in Grunch of the Giants.
But there
No
is
one dared.
one thing, there's one thing that is important. Steve, if you could go back to when Joe started reading this time. Okay. Wait, yeah. You see? Look at there. Who shows the green pasture to?
The sheep. The sheep went and found
Yeah.
the pasture. He
It
hid
is
the word
amazing.
ladder. I had to look back at that twice because he used complicated English.
Okay. So we don't know, we are shown by nature around us what it is. He say the sheep shows human where green pastures is. So we are following the sheep, right? To where green pasture. Then when he comes there, we are okay, we will move the sheep with the shepherd. But then come somebody who wants to appropriate it. So does it mean that wealth is always at the beginning from stealing a little bit from somebody? Or power for that purpose? You steal enough for the person to be kind of, how would I going to say, what is the word? Disempowered. And then you say,
Right.
okay, I'll protect you, provided you pay me a tax.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Just a bully. That's all it is.
Continue to
Okay.
read.
No one dared question the horseman's claim that he owned the land on which the horseman had said the shepherd was trespassing. The horseman had his club with which to prove that he was the power structure of that locale. He stood high above the shepherd and could ride at a speed to strike the shepherd's head with his club. This was how multi-millennia ago, 20th century racketeers' protection and territorial ownership began. For the first time, little people learned how to become the power structure and how thereby to live on the productivity of others. Then there came great battles between other individuals on horses to determine who could realistically say, "I own the land." Ownership changed frequently. The ownership claim strategy soon evolved into the horse-mounted warfare as each gang sought to overwhelm the other. Then the horse-mounted gangs, led by a most wily leader, used easily captured human prisoners to build them stone citadels as strategic points, sounded by prisoner-built moats rigged with drawbridges and draw gates. They would come pouring out to overwhelm carnivans and others crossing their domains. Deeds to land evolved from deeds of arms. They came enormous battles of gangs, and the beginning of the great land barons. Finally, we got to power structure, mergers, and acquisitions, topped by the most wily and powerful of all, the great emperor. This is how humans came to own land. The sovereign paid off his promises to powerful supporters by signing deeds to the land earned by the physical deeds of fighting in shrewd support of the right leader. Thereafter, emperors psychologically fortified the cosmic aspect of their awesome power by having priests of the prevailing religion sanctify their land, claiming as accounted simply either by discovery or by arms. And another set of events that opportuned the power structure the land barons discovered the most geographically logical trading points for caravaning, a place where one caravan trail would cross another caravan trail, where, for instance, the caravanners came to an oasis or maybe to a seaport harbor and transfer some of their goods for the camel caravans to the boats. The caravanners would say, let's exchange goods right here. Fine. You need something, I have it. One day they're exchanging.
Just pause for a second. I just checked up the etymology of the word deed. I teach real estate, and there, the real estate exam is big on words that nobody ever uses, like life estate, things like that. But I'd never heard the fact that the deed evolved from deeds of arms.
Mm-hmm.
And as I look over here on my little, I did a Google over here on etymology, literary, an action that is performed intentionally or consciously, doing good deeds. And then it says, a brave or noble act, the deeds will live long in song. Action and performance, she had erred in both deed and manner. A legal document that is signed and delivered, especially one regarding the ownership of property or legal rights. And then it just switches over, deeded, past particle, gerund, thing, convey or transfer. They deeded their property as if it were deeds of arms. I'd never thought about that. So Bucky put a lot of thought into his language.
No, yes, he did.
Cool. Okay, shall we continue?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. One day they're exchanging goods when along comes a troop of armed brigades on horseback. The head horseman says, it's pretty dangerous exchanging valuable things out there in the wilderness. The caravanners leader says, no, we never have any trouble out here. We have been doing this for many generations. Then their goods begin to be stolen nightly, and finally the merchants agree to accept and pay for protection. That was the beginning of the walled city. The horse-mounted gangsters brought prisoners along to build the city walls and saw to it that all trading was carried on inside the walls. The lead baron then gave each of his supporters control of different parts of that city so that each could collect his share of the taxes. This is how that we came to what was called archaeology, the city-state, which was to become a very powerful affair. There were two kinds: the agrarian productivity, exploiting type of, and the trade route confluence exploiting type. These produced all the great walled cities such as Jericho and Babylon. The agrarian supported city-states work in the following manner. For example, we have a Mycenaean in Greece. Sorry, Mycenaean. I shouldn't. All right, I'm tired. A beautiful and fertile valley is ringed around with mountains. You see the mountains passes from the high hill in the center of the valley. At the foot of the high central hill, there is a very good well. So they build a wall around the citadel on the top of that mid-valley hill and walls leading down to and around the well so that they can get to their water. When they see the enemy coming through the passes, the Mycenaeans bring all the food inside their walls and into their already built masonry grain bins. When they can't bring inside the walls, what they can't bring inside the walls, they burn, which act was called scorching the fields. The enemy enters the fertile valley, but there's nothing left for them to eat. The enemy army has to live on its belly, which means on the foods found along their route of travel, and is hungry on arrival in the valley. The people inside have all the food. The people outside try to break into the walled city, but they are overwhelmed by its height and its successfully defended walls. Finally, the people outside, only able to go for about 30 days without food, get weaker and weaker. Then the people inside come out and decimate them. This was a city-state. It was a successful invention for a very long period in history. At the trade route converges, city-states operated in much the same way, but on a much larger scale with the siege resisting supplies brought in by caravans or ships. The city-states were approximately invincible until the siege of Troy. Troy was the city-state controlling the integrated water and caravanning traffic between Asia and Europe near the Bosporus. It had marvelous walls. Everything seemed to be favorable for its people. Meanwhile, in history, we have millennia of people venturing forth on the world's waters, developing the first rafts, which had to go where the ocean currents took them. Then the dugouts with which they paddled a catamaran and sailed in the preferred directions. I just want to make sure, yeah, preferred directions. And finally, the ribbed and planked ship, suggested to them by the stout spine and rib cage of the whales, seals, and humans. Stoutly keeled and ribbed, deep-bellied ships, I think blah, blah. With their large ships made possible by this type of construction, sailors came to cross the great seas carrying enormous cargoes, vastly greater cargoes than could be carried on the backs of humans or animals. Ships could take the short across the bay route instead of the around the bay mountain route. The Phoenicians, Cretans, and the Messenians, together in fleets of these big ribbed and heavily planked ships, went to Troy and besieged it. Up to this time, the besieged of Troy had come overland, and they soon ran out of food. But the Troy besieging Greeks and Cretans, am I saying that right?
think so,
Cretan, or was it
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cretans.
Came to Troy in ships. It's really throwing me off. Which they could send back for more supplies. They terminally turned around, voyaging back to the supply sources, and returned to the line of battle was called their line of supply. The new line of supply masters, the Greeks, starved out the Trojans. The Trojans thought they had enough food, but had not reckoned on the people besieging them having these large ships. The Trojan horse was the large wooden ship that did the task of horses, out of whose belly poured armed troops. At this time, the power structure of the world affairs shifts from control by the city-state to the masters of the lines of supply. And this point at this point in the history of the swiftly evolving multi-banked oar and sail-driven fighting ships, the world power structure control shifts westward to Italy. While historians place prime emphasis on the Roman legions as establishing the power of the Roman Empire, it was in fact the development of ships and the overseas lines of supply upon which its power was built by transporting these legions and keeping them supplied. Go to Italy and you will see all the incredibly lovely valleys and great castellos commanding each of those valleys, such as you saw in the typical city states. And you can see none of those walls has ever been breached. Sorry. Also in Italy, in the northeastern corner is Venice, the headquarters of the water people, the Phoenicians, phonetically the Venetian.
Yeah, the
Venetians.
Venetians, phonetically the Venetians, yeah.
Yeah, that's weird. Had their South Mediterranean headquarters in Carthage in northern Africa. In their Western Mediterranean and Atlantic venturings, the Venetians became the Vikings. I see. I don't. That's weird.
I'm gonna check. That's a misspell.
Please do. Yeah, I think that might be Vikings. I don't know, maybe something else. The Phoenicians and Venetians in their ships voyaged around the whole coast of Italy and sent in their people of each castello one by one. The Venetians had an unlimited line of supply, and the people inside each castello did not. The people inside were starved out. Thus, all the regional masters of the people in Italy hated the Venetians, Phoenicians, Vikings. I mean, maybe that's it. He said it several times. Who were able to do this?
Yeah.
There being no. Okay.
Let's pause right there.
Yeah.
Because we got 9 minutes before we got to go.
Oh, wow.
That was fast. Yeah. Well, I guess when you start having fun, that's what happens, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Start everyone with music.
Did you notice one important thing at the beginning of this? And relate it, please, to inflation. What is inflation?
Excess energy being, I mean, it's excess money supply, but overheating.
Inflation is theft.
Oh yeah, that too.
It is theft
Yeah.
that has been made for people to believe is natural. Milton Friedman says inflation is and always is a monetary effect. Let's repeat it. Inflation is and always is a monetary effect. So inflation and coming to pillage people on horse, the granaries is the same thing. The second thing that I notice here is the Viking. So it's the Phoenicians, people of the sea, that created Venice. Venice is Phoenicians, and the Vikings on the west side is also Phoenician. And there were always people that came by sea and kind of exploited people of the land. So you always have that duality between the radiative, the expensive, and the gravitational that is local. Did you notice it?
Yeah.
It's a principle.
No,
And what he described there is just the same principle playing over at different fractals, as Steve will say. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but it's the same interaction that is playing.
You want to
It's
go
some
ahead?
guy that has expanded, that has expanded his understanding of things using technology and coming to appropriate the local in a way.
You want to finish up and their Manu and
Yes,
just,
so I finished. So those were my two takeaways.
yeah.
Otherwise, I'm grateful that we met and that we made it at 3. Yeah. Right. So Joe, how do you feel? What do you take away?
I feel good. The session went really fast. I enjoyed everybody's company here tonight. It was a good time, and I appreciate everybody being here. You know, two of my takeaways is one which you actually had like kind of really harped on was Manu, was inflation and how it's used as actually essentially as a weapon, and it does. It is, the old saying is inflation makes everybody poor, and it does. So it is a form of theft. Also, that was struck with me is the relationship with the land that people had, and the thuggery that essentially bullied people into paying dues into not in order to for them not to be to, you know, have their lives disrupted. We saw a lot of that in Grunch and the Giants, and that in some ways some of that stuff still goes on today on a macro scale, but even on a micro scale, you can even say, you know, with illegal, you know, I don't know, like kind of mob and things like that. Anyway, that was unfortunate to see. The use of weapons and the investing in killingery obviously goes back. It has a long history, and so what we're getting here is just the evolution of groups and nations. Even the idea of having a walled state that you know made me think of the city, Vatican City. To be quite honest. Anyway, those are, those are just some of my takeaways. We're getting a lot of history here, and I'm enjoying everybody's comments. Steve, how do you feel? What do you take away from today?
Well, I've, I remember studying world history. I remember the Phoenicians. I remember Carthage. I remember the Bronze Age. And the history I learned. By the way, I didn't bring this up. Did you guys hear that in California, the state legislature just met and they had a committee that's been working on it for a couple of years, and they proposed a first stage restoration for slavery. And they've got a proposal to that if you can prove certain lineage, that you have a minimum of $100,000 compensation. Plus, they're saying like descendants of slaves or people who were handicapped by slavery in any way, they can write up their case, present it, and get rights like veterans' rights. So they get free college tuition in California, and just doing something to start balancing out this economic disparity that comes because of this kind of thuggery that's gone on, right? I mean, the redlining in America, and it's so amazing that I learned this history, world history, fighting, and just seems so natural. It's like, oh, well, this is what happens. Somebody does something and then somebody else comes and beats their butt, and it's the whole thing of world history is survival of the fittest. And if, it's really strange. And to hear him talk about how the supply lines became more important than the city states. I mean, to see how really where the power was.
Right.
Suddenly, history is written by thugs,
Right.
and we get to wake up to that or not. I'll tell you, we're living in wonderful times where, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's hope. And there is no hope if I don't see it, but maybe there's hope. So my big takeaway is realizing how thuggery has created a lot of history, and it's because people go along with it. And I think maybe we're turning in, when the computers came out, cybernetics was a big deal, and everybody thought the guys who owned the computers were going to rule the world. So corporations got in and competed for computers and control and cybernetics. And then all of a sudden, the computer got out of control. It was no longer with the rich guys. I have one on my desk right now. This guy here is 4 times more powerful than what put a person on the moon. So, somehow it democratizes. Maybe we're actually moving into an era where people are going to be important, not because the government decides you're going to be important, just because people stand up and say, bullshit, I'm important. So anyway, that's my takeaway today. I'm grateful for you guys for sharing. I could read this book on my own, but I wouldn't be able to pause and share and get New York and Africa and Utah talking about the world.
Yeah. One thing that is really, really important here, Steve, is that people should learn to think. That geometry of thought that we've been talking about is paramount.
Yeah.
That's the only way. And that is the only tool that you have in the room of final examination, individual final examination. That is in the room of a choice. What do you use for choice? Is being informed, placing together things, and anticipating and say, this is where I'm going. And this is so important for everybody, is to learn to think. We don't devote enough time. Although many people have the capacity to think, they neglect it. We don't devote enough time to think and then act. That's
Very
another takeaway that I have. Otherwise, yeah.
Really good, guys. Thanks for sharing.
All right.
Look forward
Thank
to our
you.
conversation. Thanks for getting up early, Manu.
Okay. I'm just
Let's
going
go
to
to,
have.
let's go back to
I'm
bed.
going to bed again now. Yeah,
Good.
because I was sleepy, really.
See
Okay,
y'all.
guys.
Go to
Alright.
bed.
Good night.
Go to bed, Joe. It's freaking 1 o'clock there.
I
1:02.
know. What's the
Joe,
point
you're
of
not
sleeping
in,
anymore?
you're not in New York.
I'm in New York. I'm in Philadelphia.
You do
It's,
what?
it's 1 o'clock
Philadelphia.
in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're not in New York. I thought you were in.
Well, he's in the industrial complex.
Okay,
there.
in the tri-state area.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
Philadelphia.
got New York, he's got New Jersey,
New
he's
Jersey.
got Philadelphia. It's like,
Yeah.
it's the
Yeah.
gangsters, they're all there.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Actually, we were just reading about them.
That's right.
And they have
That's-
Princeton. You see.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
very
Okay.
good, guys.
I don't know if that's I don't know if they're part of the people that hold people hostage or not. I don't know. I shouldn't say that.
No, Princeton is part. You know, is in Pittsburgh. Princeton.
What?
Princeton is in Pittsburgh. Princeton University.
Princeton University is New Jersey.
Yeah. Pittsburgh is where?
Yeah.
In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it just
Pittsburgh is
closed.
about there.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I
Hey,
thought
what?
yes.
It closed?
No, not too far, no?
Oh no, it is pretty far. It's
Yeah.
a few hours. Yeah.
A
so-
few hours, huh?
But yeah. I mean, it's drivable.
It's as drivable from Philadelphia as St. George is drivable from Salt Lake City. I
Yes,
drove
4
I drove
hours.
4 hours today.
Yeah.
Both
Is that-
ways.
But
I've been on the
but
road
4
for 8 hours
hours.
today.
Yeah, look, we should always put everything in perspective. 4 hours is pretty close, given the scale of the US.
Right.
You know, if you're planning to drive from New York to Houston,
That's a lot
your
more.
4
than-
hours is just next door, isn't it?
Yeah, New York to Houston is not 4 hours. That's a.
No, I'm just
2
saying you have to put that into perspective,
Yeah,
what it is. So 4 hours in the state is pretty close. If you say you are in New York, you want to go to Los Angeles, it's not far a drive. That is, I don't know how long it takes you days.
I'll tell you how long it takes. It takes 24 hours to
Okay.
drive 1,634 miles.
From
So-
New York to where?
Houston to New York.
Yes,
That's halfway across the US.
yes. That is the distance between that's the way it would take from here to Johannesburg, from Cape Town to
Uh-huh.
Johannesburg. Yes.
Cool. Okay, folks. Love and peace.
Yes.
See you next time around.
Cheers. Take care,
Bye.
guys.